evening. I'd like to begin by asking how many of you out there have siblings? Please raise your hands. Okay, great. Okay, well, what I'm going to be talking about tonight is a question you've probably asked yourself since you do have siblings, which is, so who's my mom's favorite child? Now, when I talk about this topic, I like to begin with this visual, which is a great family portrait. You've already been looking too closely. Yes, here we have Mama feeding her baby, and this is a really good thing for moms to do. However, you might notice that what Mom is standing on to get the elevation she needs is her other baby's head. So we have a picture of maternal favoritism and maternal disfavoritism. Right? Now, there's been a very long history of both interest in and concern with parental favoritism. We can go back to early biblical stories, such as Joseph with his many-colored coat, who was his father's favorite, and because of that, his brothers hated him, and they thought about killing him, but they decided just to sell him into slavery. Now we have a more humorous and contemporary example in the Romano family that we all know from Everybody Loves Raymond. And there in the center, we have Ray looking very happy, the favorite child, of course, and his brother Robert standing behind him looking a little glum. Now, these are both examples from adulthood. But in fact, most of the attention on parental favoritism is focused on childhood, as reflected in this recent New York Times cover story. And there's really good reason to be concerned with parental favoritism in childhood. Reports from both parents and children suggest it's very common and it's very consequential. So why am I going to talk about favoritism in adulthood tonight? I mean, we are adults. We're supposed to get past these petty things. And so what difference does it make if now you think that your mom prefers to hang out with your sister? And maybe you think that she brags more about your sister's accomplishments and your brother's accomplishments than yours. I mean, really now, we are adults. This doesn't matter, right? Well, I'm here to talk about whether maybe it does matter. And I'm going to draw from a study that I've been conducting for the last 15 years in collaboration with Carl Pillemer and Megan Gilligan, which is called the Within Family Differences Study. Now, when Carl and I began the study 15 years ago, we didn't know whether, in fact, moms would be willing to talk about this at all. And in fact, when I talked to my own mother-in-law about the study, when we were in the planning stages, she said, well, if anybody asked me whether I chose my son or my daughter, I would say, I love the dog the most. So despite that not terribly encouraging reply, we proceeded to recruit more than 550 moms who at the time were ages 65 to 75. And we sent interviewers into their homes to spend a couple of hours with each of these mothers, talking to them about their relationships with each of their adult children. Now, the part of the study I'm going to talk about tonight is from a second wave of the study, when we went back between 2008 and 2011, and we re-interviewed 420 of those original moms, which was more than 85% of those who were still living at that time. And by that point, these moms were, on average, as you can see, 72 to 82. And we interviewed 835 of their adult children. Now, I will frequently refer to these as the kids, but as you can see, the kids on average were 50 years of age. So these are like big kids, by which point, of course, favoritism doesn't matter, right? So, well, what did we find? Well, we asked these moms a lot of questions about their kids, and among those questions, each mother was asked to select a child to whom she felt the most emotionally close, with whom she had the most disagreements or arguments, in whom she had the most pride, and in whom she was the most disappointed. So what did we learn? Well, first of all, we learned these moms, in fact, were very willing to talk to us. In fact, 70% were willing to identify a child to whom they were most emotionally close. And about the same percent were willing to identify a child with whom they had the most conflict. More than half were willing to identify a child in whom they were the most proud, and more than half were willing to identify a child in whom they were most disappointed. Now, two things you can't tell from these data are, first, even though these moms are willing to discuss this with us, this doesn't mean they were always really anxious to. So very often when our interviewers would pose these questions, the first thing the moms would say is, how can you ask me that? I'm like, how could I answer that question? After all, I love all of my children the same. Well, our interviewers knew that they were supposed to sort of sit back and wait a minute and see if these moms would say something else after they thought about it for a minute. So to typically, these moms would come back and say something like, I really do love all my children the same, but there's just something with Susan. I don't know why it's there. I didn't mean for it to be there. I know I shouldn't feel that way, and I never tell anybody, but there's just something special with Susan, right? And the other thing we know from these moms is, remember, by this point in the study, we'd already talked to these moms once 7 or 8 years before. Much to our surprise, most of these moms named the same children in response to each of these questions that they'd given us 7 to 8 years before. So it suggests that there's a lot of stability in favoritism in adulthood. So what does it take to be the child in whom mom is most proud or with whom she has the most conflict? Well, let's start with closeness. So who's most likely to be the child whom mom names as being the most close to her? First, being a daughter. Daughters were overwhelmingly chosen over sons, and this part didn't surprise us. There's a very large scientific literature showing that mom-daughter tie in adulthood typically is very intimate, very intense, very close. Sharing mom's values. Now, we asked moms about values across a wide array of topics, religion, politics, general outlook on life. The children whom mom named as those to whom they were most close were the children who most closely shared her values. Now, I want to know, raise your hands again, how many of you out there are firstborns, those eldest? Raise your hands up high. Okay, and of course, you know you are mom's favorite child because you are the firstborn, yes? Right. Well, I have sad news for you. Overwhelmingly, moms chose those lastborns. Those must be those of you who are smiling right now, okay? So it's those babies in the family. Now, how do you get to be the kid with whom mom has the most conflict? Daughter. Now you're saying, well, this looks a little contradictory. We just saw daughter for closeness. Well, there are two possibilities here. So one is there are two different daughters. Mom is most close to one, has most conflict with the other. But very often, these are the same daughters. Think about the relationships that are really meaningful to you. Those are the relationships we always want to be perfect, right? And you always want them to work right. And when you feel it's just not quite right, what do? You sort of start fiddling with that relationship to make it better. And what do you usually get? You end up with conflict, right? Not sharing mother's values. Values are really important to mom. You don't share her values, you have a lot of bases to have a lot of conflict with mom. Poor partner choices. Now, you may think poor partner choice to mom means, okay, you found somebody who didn't have a good enough job, or maybe no job, they don't have inherited wealth. This is not what mom is thinking about, though. For mom, a good choice is when you choose a partner who tries to become a member of your family. That's a good partner. A poor partner tries to pull you away from your family. Maybe they don't like that new mom-in-law, that new dad-in-law, those new siblings-in-law, so they try to pull you away. Or maybe that new partner just isn't good to you. Maybe they're disrespectful, neglectful, controlling, maybe even abusive. If you've chosen that partner, you're going to have a lot of conflict with mom because she just does not think this is the right person for you. Right? So, what about pride? How do you become the child in whom mom has the most pride? Well, first of all, not surprisingly, is education. But it's not quite as simple as it looks. It is true, in general, the more education you have, the more it is likely your mom will be very proud of you. But let's imagine that mom has 2 kids. And one of them, from the minute that kid was born, mom was sure that kid was headed for Harvard. But that kid went to a very good state university. She has another kid, and that other kid did not go to Harvard. That other kid struggled with school from the minute she hit kindergarten. And mom didn't know if she could ever get through high school. That kid graduated from high school, went on to the local community college, finished that AA degree in 2 years. Who do you think mom is more likely to say she's the most proud of? Generally, it's that kid she was worried wouldn't make it through high school who instead finished that AA degree. So it's all about mom's perspective. Again, sharing mom's values. This is really important to mom because if you've embraced mom's values, She thinks you're going to be a person who's going to be someone she could always be proud of, the way you behave, what you do for the world, okay? Staying out of trouble. Moms are very patient. Moms will put up with a lot. And we had a lot of moms who talked to us about how much they loved and supported their children whom they went and visited regularly in prison. Now, we believe those moms really did love and support those kids, but those were not the kids who were named as the ones in whom they had the most pride. Okay, stay out of prison if you want to be top of the pride list. What about disappointment? Well, I hate to tell you guys out there, your risk of being the child, if you're a son, your risk doubles relative to your sisters, just the way it is. And again, mom's values matter. You don't share her values, mom will be disappointed in you. Poor partner choices, again, choose well, mom will not be happy. And last is underachievement. Now, remember, this is from mom's perspective, not yours or mine. So we had a lot of moms who said things like, oh, my son, he graduated from college 20 years ago, he got this great job. And then he went back to school, and he got another degree and another job. And then after a year, he went back to school again, and he got another certificate and a different job. And he kept doing this over and over. Now, each of these jobs is a little better than the last one, but what's the point? The first job was good. Couldn't he show a little bit of maturity and stability and stick with it? I don't know what's wrong with him. We had other moms who said, oh, my daughter graduated from college 20 years ago, and she got this great job, and she's still there. Who does that? She's had the same job, and it was a good job, but nobody stays with the same job, the same company. She needed to better herself. I just don't know what's wrong with her. So you and I would think both these kids look like they're doing pretty well. Those moms didn't think so. So far, we've been talking about this from the perspective of the moms. What about the perspective of those adult children? What are they thinking? Well, there are a couple of ways of thinking about this. So let's imagine I have two siblings. Let's say I had Heather and Todd. Now, best guess is I'm not spending a lot of time trying to figure out, well, does mom prefer Heather over Todd or Todd over Heather? I'm really interested in, well, where am I in this pecking order? So what we did was we took the data on those kids who were sure they were the ones mom named. And we looked to see, so how accurately were they reporting what mom was thinking? And what we found was they are very poor reporters. In fact, less than half of the kids were correct who were sure mom chose them as most close. And most typically, the kids who weren't chosen were really emphatic. Oh, I know it's mom and me. We are just so close. We just have this thing. We don't tell my siblings, they'd be upset. But mom and I, we know. Well, mom almost never chose those kids. And they were also poor reporters in terms of conflict. So you're sure you are the kid who's always been the pain to mom. You know, you fight with her all the time. Every time you see her, you argue with her. You know she thinks you are the pain in the family. You only have a 50-50 chance that you're right, which is good news. What about pride? Kids are really bad reporters when it comes to who mom's proud of. Only 39% of them were correct. And again, the kids who weren't chosen tended to be the most sure they were, oh, I know it's me. Mom's so proud of me. I went to Princeton, and then I went to law school, and I passed the bar on the first try. I'm in this great firm. I make so much money, it's almost embarrassing. Mom is so proud of me. My siblings, they did okay, but it's really me. Rarely did mom choose those kids. And you're sure you're the kid in whom mom has always been the most disappointed. You just know it. And it's a real burden to carry around. Well, the good news is, you're probably wrong. Only 40% of those kids were the kids mom named. So what difference does it make? If everybody's this wrong, if kids' perceptions are this inaccurate, does any of this matter? Well, sadly, yeah, it does matter a lot. Your perceptions matter more than what mom really thinks, especially since you don't really seem to know what mom really thinks. And we know that there are consequences. We know that in families in which adult children feel that mom does favor someone, whether they think she favors them or favors a sibling, just that presence, that presence of perceptions of favoritism lead to a lot of sibling conflict and a lot less sibling closeness. And we found higher depressive symptoms among adult children who perceived they had the most conflict with mom, or in whom mom was the most disappointed. Now, this isn't a big surprise. I mean, who wants to be the kid whom mom is the most angry with and whom she's the most disappointed in? But what was surprising is the kids who felt they were closest to mom also had higher depressive symptoms. Now, what could be wrong with being close to mom? Think about how old these moms are. Think of where they are in their lives. They're in their 70s, their 80s, they're moving toward their 90s. Think about people in your life you really care about. You feel it's your job to make things better, to make things okay. When things go wrong, you're the one to fix things and make it all right. But your mom's in her 80s, going into her 90s, she's going to experience health problems you can't fix. And for the children, especially who feel really close to mom, that's a heavy weight to carry, because things aren't always going to go right and you can't fix them, and it's very hard for you, especially when you feel you're that very close kid. So, what's an adult child to do? Well, we have good news and bad news. So here's your life at 10, here's your life at 50, and of course, you are the child with the one dinky present, right? And there is your sister with all these presents. Well, the good news is you're probably wrong. And your sister may be looking at you thinking the same thing. And in fact, the best guess is you're wrong about the pecking order. And that's a good thing. And maybe you're even wrong about whether there is a pecking order. So the good news is that. The bad news is, as a mom, you can't really control this. It may be that your kids think that you favor one over another, even if you don't at all. From the adult child standpoint, what can you do? You can recognize, first, you may well be wrong, and that second, what is also very important, is that siblings can be a wonderful source of friendship and closeness and support throughout your life, but only if those relationships haven't been undermined by having rivalry for sibling favor across the life course. Thank you very much.